Hi, my name is Michael Poley, and I've never seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer. My friends are obsessed and always make jokes and references to it, and so now, 20 years later, I've been convinced to watch the show from beginning to end, one episode a week. I'm a Buffy virgin. Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Buffy Virgin. My name's Michael. I'm the Virgin. I've never seen any of Buffy the Vampire Slayer except all the way up to Season 3, Episode 11, Gingerbread. And today we have on the show John Landis, a Buffy enthusiast and teacher.
Hello.
We have Travis.
Hey, everyone.
Dennis St. John, an amazing horror comics cartoonist.
Happy 2018, fuckers.
And a very special guest, Elizabeth Kozup.
Hi.
So Elizabeth is my wife, but she's more than just that. She's also a super fan of Buffy and urban fantasy and fantasy literature in general. So I'm very excited to have her on the show. Now, Elizabeth, can you tell us when did you first see Buffy? When did you lose your Buffy virginity?
So Buffy was definitely part of my, it was a part of my high school, but only peripherally. A lot of my friends were really into Buffy. And so because of that, I would see episodes on occasion, but I never was like a Buffy fan. And I do remember though, seeing this episode when I was in high school. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be on this particular episode today. But I really watched them about 2 years ago. So I kind of sat down and watched everything. I binged it pretty heavily about 2 years ago, and I also did Angel at the same time. So that's kind of when I really got into it. Although, again, familiar since high school, which was the 90s.
Is that when Michael first got his forced glimpses at Buffy? Is that part of the secret origin of this podcast?
That's probably a little bit to do with it. I think also having to do with Travis and I were probably talking about episodes of Buffy while I was watching it. And then Michael was finally like, oh, God, I should just watch this. And that's probably
What happened?
I mean, I was literally be in the same room, but just tuning them out while they had their Buffy and Grimm conversations.
Little did you know that, your not knowing about it would be held against you in a point system.
This episode has a little bit of a Grimm joke in it.
Yeah, it does. Well, we're going to get started then with the summary of the episode, and then, of course, we'll get into great lines, then weird noticings, trivia, questions for the group, themes, predictions, a kill count, and recommendations. So we'll get started first with the summary of the episode.
It's a school night. Buffy's out on patrol. Just a normal evening, struggling with the undead, running across the corpses of children. Except that this time, Buffy's mom has invited herself along. Mom. Whatever. Buffy will research the triangle wearing an upside-down mustache symbol from the children's hands and hopefully find a clue as to what's going on. Next day, like a total square, Buffy's mom is still acting all traumatized because she saw a couple dead bodies of a couple small children. She blames the occult. That is, she blames the occult in general, not just the monsters, but the witches and the slayers too. She forms a parents group, the Mothers Opposed to the Occult, or MOO for short. Under the new authority of MOO, the school begins a literal witch hunt, searching lockers for spellcasting materials and confiscating Giles' books, and Willow's witchy friend Amy is sent to the principal's office for questioning. Back home, Buffy's mother dishes out some tough love. She is not permitted to spend time with that witchy Willow anymore. Joyce thinks it's, great that Buffy wants to fight evil, but Sunnydale just doesn't seem to be improving. Buffy's just reacting to evil as she sees it, and it's bound to be fruitless. Offended by this characterization of her slayage, Buffy storms off to patrol again. As soon as she is out of the room, the ghosts of the murdered children reappear and urge Joyce to continue with her MOO activities and to hurt the bad people. Giles and the rest of the gang struggle to conduct research without access to books and without access to Willow, who has been grounded by her moother. Nevertheless, they determine that the murdered children actually seem to come from nowhere. They have no names, no families, and have in fact reappeared every 50 years to sow suspicion and turmoil. The anti-occult climate reaches fever pitch in Sunnydale. Gothy teens are being attacked in the streets, Cordelia's mother confiscates all of her back clothes, and now a completely insane Joyce successfully manages to drug Buffy, for a good old-fashioned witch burning. Willow, Amy, and Buffy are tied up as tinder and kindling are gathered. Rather than be burned alive, Amy repeats a spell that she learned from her mother and transforms herself into a rat, leaving Willow and Buffy to broil. Luckily, the rest of the game descends on the burning at the last minute. Cordelia putting out the flames with the mysterious fire hose. I don't know why it's mysterious. Oz and Xander helpfully Judd Nelsoning their way into the room, and Giles using magic to reveal the true form of the ghost children, a gigantic monster with nipples, fangs, and boils. Buffy handily throat stabs the monster, and all is well. Of course, Amy is still a rat. Oh well, new pet!
Yay!
Yeah, so good.
Excellent summary.
Thank you.
Ooh, there.
Yeah, we'll just be saying that now for weeks. So let's get started with great lines. What are some of the most fun lines that you enjoyed the most in the episode? I'll start with my favorite. It's Xander and Buffy dialogue. Xander says, "Look, I'm getting sick of the judgment, the innuendos. Is a man not innocent until proven guilty?" Buffy, "You are guilty. You got illicit smoochies. Gonna have to pay the price." Travis, I see you next on this here.
Oh yeah, Xander says, "Oh man, it's Nazi Germany, and I've got Playboys in my locker," which is so inappropriate on so many levels. Another one I liked was when Willow's mom said to Buffy, "Oh hi, Bunny," and she says it again later.
Yeah.
And then finally, to call back to Mike's frustration with Giles getting hit on the head so many times, Cordelia says to Giles, "Took you long and what?" She slaps him awake. "Took you long enough to wake up. My hand hurts. Things are way out of control. I came over and found you all unconscious again. How many times have you been knocked out anyway? I swear, one of these times you're going to wake up in a coma."
Wake up in a coma.
Yeah, he loves that.
Yeah, that was great.
Oh, beautiful.
This episode is just
Perfect
like
Cordelia.
even more than usual, just packed with really good weird dialogue. My first three here are all from like just a 5-minute section.
Yeah.
Where everybody uses uses kind of the same gag of like just repeating words a lot, and it just keeps working because it's really funny. So I have from Cordelia, "I doubt your doubt." Amy is a witch, and Michael is whatever a boy witch is. And then I have from Xander talking about Oz, where he's like, "It's more verbal, nonverbal. He speaks volumes with his eyes."
That was very slashy, I thought.
Yeah, totally. And then Willow has the just very impressive that they could get this out. "A doodle. I do doodle. You too. You do doodle too."
That's an amazing line.
That is amazing.
And then Willow also had a bunch when she was talking to her mom. She's like, "I'm not an age group. I'm me, Willow group." And when she's getting angry at her mom, it's like doesn't believe her that she's a witch. And she's like, "Do you see any goats around?" "No, because I sacrificed them."
I love those. I kind of glommed onto that same idea. It's like she's talking about her powers or her burgeoning powers, and she's like, "I can summon the 4 elements. Well, 2, but 4 soon." And I just think it's like makes me wonder, like, which 2 can you summon, and have we seen them yet?
I think she can summon fire. I think there was a comment about her accidentally setting like
Right.
a small fire in her bed a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. And then this is really where Snyder kind of this is like Snyder's joyous experience right here, where he finally gets to like rain down terror on his high school and on his students. So this is a glorious day for principals everywhere. No pathetic whining about students' rights, just a long row of lockers and a man with a key. And then as they're confiscating all of Giles' books, like, "I love the smell of desperate librarian in the morning."
That's an amazing quote.
Smells
Which
of
is,
paperbacks and fear.
oh gosh. Yeah, I think Snyder is in his element in this particular episode because we're finally able to truly persecute those mangy children.
I just want to plug in. I think in my mind, I call this episode the fan fiction episode because so much weird stuff happens. It's like it's fan fiction. To me, at least.
It is weird, and I have a prediction about how I don't think they'll even remember this happened. But we can get into it in questions and themes. So let's get started with weird noticings and trivia. This is all the weird, fun, interesting stuff that we want to talk about that we noticed in this episode. So starting out here with Dennis, you're the first weird noticing.
I said Buffy having to parent her mom. Also, the same playground Drusilla tried to kill that kid on. Just in the opening scene, once Joyce finds the dead bodies, that like they do the role reversal thing, and Buffy has to be like, it'll be okay, and it starts to set up the themes about parenting in this episode.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to talk about that because I feel like that's something that you do as a kid. You totally want to protect your parents from the world, and which is a weird situation, but because of the way anyway how they treat us, we'll get into it. John, you have the next thing here about a doll that I didn't notice.
Well, we talked about this. So way back in season 2, episode 11, that's I Only Have Eyes for You, where the school is haunted. And one of the things that happens is a monster hand reaches out of Xander's locker. And we talked about this in that episode, that we get a really brief glimpse of Xander's locker, and he has a novelty voodoo doll, which I have this exact same voodoo doll. It's from Archie McPhee, but Xander has it hanging in his locker from a noose, which is a weird thing to have in your locker. But they confiscate it in this episode, and we see it. This is from Xander. It's not acknowledged in this episode that it's from Xander's locker, but if you pay very close attention to season 2, episode 11, you know that it's from Xander's locker.
I noticed that also, but I wondered if, because they hadn't gotten to Xander's locker yet, because we see that before he says this stuff about having Playboys, if that's just a thing going on in Sunnydale of a lot of voodoo dolls.
Oh, it's like a fad? It's like having a Furby or something?
Well, we didn't go through like a voodoo doll episode, really. I mean, with the exception of the witch, I guess there is kind of a doll, but it's like, but it didn't sweep the high school. Like there wasn't like a hysteria around voodoo dolls yet.
But as we pointed out in season 2, episode 11, Sunnydale is the worst place to have a joke. Voodoo doll. Because that shit can get real fast.
So just want to point this out. Amy's on the team now, apparently, like in Cordelia's spot at the lunch table. When did this shit happen? Did I miss a memo?
No, I've been trying to point out, because of this episode, I've been trying to point out whenever Amy gets mentioned. And so Willow occasionally mentions Amy the witch, right? So I think it's just been this building thing of like, Willow actually has friends outside of the Scooby Gang, and it's Amy and Michael, the boy witch.
Oh, he's lovely.
I feel like there's a whole parallel TV show here, or at least a comic book about just the Coven's adventures, like with Buffy not showing up.
Do you mean the Cyber Coven?
Where's Jenny Calendar?
Cyber Coven's such a good band name. Dennis, you have the next thing here.
Oh, just when Buffy is upset that her mom is at the school, and she's like, this is about this, and like my world. It just reminded me of in Seinfeld when George is like, my worlds are colliding. Say goodbye to Independent George.
Actually, along that note, Buffy's upset about her mom coming in. Willow's upset because her mom like never pays attention to her, and then we kind of see Amy just go,
yeah. That's a really. I forgot to put that in the notes. Yeah, they cut to Amy about moms. It's so subtle. Poor Amy.
Yeah.
Yeah, who has the worst mom stories?
Like, this is why we always say you have to watch season 1. That'd be lost on you if you didn't.
I guess talking about Willow's friends, I guess we kind of...
I just think it's nice she has friends outside of the main group, even if it's a coven.
So, jumping ahead a little bit, I love Joyce's speech about the town's fucked up silence and commitment to silence. It's amazing, and it reveals so much about what's going on in the show, and it's amazing that anyone is even aware, apparently, that there are terrible things going on. It's like the first kind of announced revelation that, we are looking in the mirror, we're aware this stuff is happening, and it's so powerful, given that we've never heard anything like this. Anyway, great speech. And
more on that later, I think.
Yeah, we'll get into it for sure. And it should be like motto or something, right? Not moo, right?
That's a really good point. Motto is so much better.
I think it should be parents opposed to the occult, so it's poo.
I mean, Pato works too, but
I think we're all in for poo.
Why is it only got to be moms?
Or pato or mato. Dennis, you got the next here. I don't know what you mean by.
Just the when Willow's mom comes in and Joyce and Giles are talking, and they're like, "I haven't seen you since the so it's been a while," and she's like, "I heard a rumor." What about us?
Yeah.
Just once again confirming Mike's predictions that they're not going to acknowledge what happened, but it happened.
Oh yeah, and I love that Giles is so anxious that they're about to talk about that. And then clearly they're gathered for something so different. But when you're guilty, right? It's
Yeah.
so good.
He's sweating bullets there. And then the mayor gets up to speak, and it's just kind of interesting because this is the first time we've seen the mayor, like in a larger setting, and we know he's evil, but nobody else does yet. You know,
This is the only time he's actually mayoring. Like,
yeah. And I discovered recently that the mayor is in an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. He's in Tin Man. He's the psychic that only
blew
likes...
my mind when you told me that, Dennis. That's because I've seen that episode many, many times. I remember that character very well. And
Yeah, I never put it together. Yeah.
If you're listening to this podcast, you'll probably be hearing a Star Trek sound. Those are cues for when Star Trek is discussed, and I notice it. Anyway. You can also drink. Cool. Travis, you have the next here?
Oh yeah, it was funny to see the people who are hassling the boy. What is the boy's witch name again? I forget. Michael. It's Michael? That was confusing. And then they're hassling him, and they're wearing varsity leather jackets, so they're definitely a sports team, and sports are evil. Organized sports.
Yeah. Buffy hates sports. That is definitely a pattern.
But then they're also all afraid of Buffy when she shows up, which is
I love that Buffy is so out in the open by season 3.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
The days of like pretending you're not the Slayer are so over. Like she doesn't even say like, "What about me?" She just like walks over, and they're like, "Whoa."
Yeah, that's rad. That felt really good. That was like when people think of this show as like a female positive show that's like a feminist show, like that moment really does it.
Yeah.
And then Dennis, I guess talking about just witches.
I said there are a lot of witches in the school when they're busting through the lockers. Just like it's not just Amy, Willow, and Michael. It's like a lot of people have like mysterious bags. This is a fucking cult school, man.
That's because you have to have the occult to protect yourself in Sunnydale. I figure the interest in the occult is like jacked up in Sunnydale.
Yeah.
Well,
totally.
it's normal for people to be obsessed with mythological practices. It's normal
At this age group to identify with. I like the feeling of righteous anger towards these people violating our rights to lockers. I think this episode does it well. I feel it.
I think I had the next one, but I thought Buffy didn't trust Willow as much as she should have at first. But I rewatched it and thought, she trusts Willow. What Willow's saying that it was fine, that it was a peaceful sign. But initially, I thought, Buffy should trust Willow a bit more.
Yeah. I think it's just Buffy's following the clues, and they lead to Willow, which surprises her. But yeah, she should immediately have 100% trust in Willow. Willow's earned it.
Dennis, I think you have the next here about the school library collection.
Oh yeah, I say maybe Snyder and Joyce have a reasonable question about the school library collection.
Yeah. Totally.
All Giles' personal collection, right? So like,
but don't bring it to work. I don't bring my dirty books to work.
Well, apparently Xander does too, so there's an issue.
But Giles has to get his unofficial work done officially at work.
I just think that the mayor it's like confiscated in the city hall. So it seems like you can't really just take somebody's like private property, personal property, right?
Yeah.
No, it's super weird, and that he would have all of these important occult books available at the school for the school to use. Of course, there's going to be a witch problem. Like part of it is the access to these books at the library.
Only there was some kind of like locked structure within the library where you keep those books.
Oh, if only.
Not so smart book guy.
But they don't mention the tranquilizer gun or all the other weird.
Crossbows.
That's all normal.
Yeah, where's the weapons stuff? They didn't notice any of that. That's true. He's got like a mace.
Like a medieval times mace.
That's true. I've never thought about that for some reason.
Travis, you want to talk about Willow's haircut?
Oh yeah, I did not notice Willow's haircut. She just cut the length, but the style didn't change very much. So I don't know. Just a funny thing where Mike made fun of me for noticing Buffy's haircut.
No, I mean it's this. I didn't notice either. It was just
I
like
noticed
weird,
zero.
you know, it's just weird evidence about Willow's broken relationship with her mom. But like, I've seen the same hair the whole time.
But we're not Willow's parents.
True. Elizabeth, you have the next kind of observation here.
Yeah, I noticed usually Giles is really hesitant to say who he thinks did what. Like, it's almost like pulling teeth. Sometimes he'll like put a book down and run away and we won't get to understand what exactly, who done it. And we're like all waiting. And this one, he immediately calls out the occult and he immediately calls out witches as being the potential perpetrators. And I think he does a little bit to like foment the unrest that people are kind of seeing for this. Whereas like, I mean, there is something to be said about his reticence that he usually experiences.
And then you have, sorry?
I don't know. Maybe that's part of the Hansel Gretel spell, is like to announce these, to see these lines and announce them early. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, and then Willow's putting together, I don't know if this might be the second act, but yeah, Willow's putting together this protection spell, but it's a really intense protection spell. I mean, I don't know a lot about the occult, I'm going to say that, but I feel like the skulls feel really sinister to me when putting together a protection spell, that feels a little bit more malicious than protective.
Yeah, that looked like the kind of skull you dig up yourself. That didn't look like the kind you get from a biology class or something.
It's such a great reveal, too, when they cut to, you know, Willow as a part of this occult group. It's lovely. I know, again, I've said this before, but like if my mom or, you know, your mom were to come in and you're like 12 watching this, like this show's never going to be allowed on again. That's what you're watching.
I actually have a distinct memory of my dad watching this episode and being like, oh, Willow's evil in this episode? All right.
Your dad knows who Willow is. That's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. Or maybe he didn't say Willow, but he's like, I thought she was her friend. I guess she's just evil in this episode. That's how those things work, right? I was like, we don't know anything yet, Dad.
That's a surprising amount of Buffy to be watching, though, even for a dad, I feel like.
Yeah. Dad watches a lot of TV. He's watching Smilf right now. It's like a Showtime series, and he was like,
short for like Smurf I'd like to fuck?
It's single mother. The thing is, Dad was watching like episode 6 or whatever, and he was like, I don't know what it stands for. What does it stand for, Dennis? And I was like, I think it stands for single mother I'd like to It is always a weird statement to say in front of your father, even if it's his show.
I've never heard of that show.
I do like that they qualified between the regular mothers and the single mothers, so that's nice. That's good.
True.
It's very grown up of them to do that.
It's very different than MILF.
Married mother?
Yeah.
All it means is a new category on Pornhub. So,
it's short for married moo mothers.
So I moving on. I love watching Giles being forced to use a computer, and I was reminded of like the Harry Dresden character in his like inability to use technology. Of course, they have like a wizard reason for that in that book, but it's pretty wonderful. Giles like eating chips, trying to figure something out, and like getting angry.
Yeah, you fad. That's right.
It just like reminds me of like anytime I see anytime in the 90s, like 10 years ago, seeing my dad lose it about a computer thing and then blaming me for a problem. I'm like, I used the computer one time. He's like, it's slow now.
That's definitely, I mean, I think we're all maybe only 10 years away from that, right? Like from no longer being able to use new technology.
Well, I'm already yelling at my phone like an old man all the time.
I definitely see it. I just definitely see it in my office of like the age group difference. And like, there's a certain point where like you stop being able to like intuitively understand new technology and you like get really mad. Like, I guess it's going to happen to me because like I'm human. Everybody else.
I definitely see it in our house where we have a Google Home and where I don't want to trigger it, so I'm not going to say the words, but like I have a Google Home and like we'll set timers and stuff and the timers keep going. And then we both kind of yell at it to shut up. And just like I could actually whisper into my phone and it's connected over wireless, but like my brain thinks the home is over across the house. So I yell at it. I'm like, man, this is some old man stuff happening.
Yeah.
This is some Black Mirror shit. You're on the mic here being like, gotta keep my voice down. My home is listening.
I can't let my home know.
You guys know it's the wake word.
Yeah.
You know, like if you say it.
I won't say it because I'm close enough to it.
Yeah.
That it will trigger. Like there have been times where like I will be in the basement, Mike will be upstairs, and all of a sudden a timer or something will start going off, and we're like, how did it go off? It just it hears you. It hears you wherever you are.
Nope.
It's easy to accidentally set a timer for like years or days. You know, so that's how we've done it.
Yeah.
Nope.
My
we have the enterprise computer.
My
That's when I'll
cousins
start
have the Amazon one, and like her kids are old enough now that the robot understands their voice. So it like so it'll sometimes you're responding to like kids yelling, like multiple kids yelling at the same time, and it's like it's frightening. And they could very easily like order insane things, or like just because they want to hear like it's raining tacos, suddenly tacos could come to the house or something. That's kids' favorite songs now, by the way. Is It's Raining Tacos.
I like that song too. I've never heard it, but it sounds great.
Ask your machine to play it.
I'll pause.
Dennis, you have the next back around Buffy conversation topic here.
Where are we? Oh, I say, welcome back to the season 2 game of Are Buffy and Angel Dating? They have a romantic vibe in the cemetery.
Definitely.
I really like it too. It's such a cute scene. Oh, except for this thing that John's going to mention.
It's really creepy where, they do a really cheap joke where, like, it's like, Buffy's like, I'll be like the boy who put his finger in the duck, and Angel's like, it's Dyke. And then Buffy does like a really silly, like, spit take face, which is a really cheap joke. But the thrust of this joke is that Buffy doesn't know what dyke means, and that Angel's like old and wise and knows what it means, which is why they should not date each other, because he's an adult and she's a child.
Yeah.
It was really clear in that conversation.
And he immediately understood too, like what she didn't get. Like he jumped right in there. There was no pause. He's like, it's a dam. Like
I had a friend who did a comic for a while called Dyke Kitty that was about a lesbian cat that lived on a dike. It was dumb.
What happens in an episode of Dyke Kitty?
I think she only did like one issue, but she got in a fight with her sister Fashion Kitty, and she went and lived on a dike. Oh, and she had sex with a dog. Confuses the issue about the dike thing. But
well, was it a male or a female dog?
I think it was a male. All dogs are male.
Oh, right.
And also go to heaven.
Dennis, you have the next thing here about how to be a rebel.
Oh, I liked Willow getting really upset with her mom and being like, I'm a rebel. I'm having a rebellion. That feels
5 seconds before that, but Willow's mom is like, you're only saying this to prove that you're special, to get attention. And then she immediately does that.
I don't know. Sometimes if you feel like you're going through a teen rebellion, but it's not being noticed, when you're directly stating it, it is a fail of a rebellion.
And then we've got the Cyber Coven comment finally coming up.
Oh yeah, Will's mom says Cyber Coven, and it makes me miss Jenny Calendar. This episode really you feel the lack of her presence.
Yeah, Giles really needed her when he's using the computer.
Yeah, totally.
She probably could have cleared up a lot of stuff real early on, too.
But you're right. This wouldn't have even been an adventure. It would have been like, oh, yeah, the Hansel and Gretel children that appear every 50 years. I just Googled that last night.
Let me cast some Google runes on this.
I think she would have been like also on the stake with the rest of them. I don't think that
that's for
we would have corrected it.
Yeah.
Been like, oh, she's a lady. Which, John, you have a thing here about the chloroform?
Well, it's just really interesting to me that, like, the instant Joyce wants to take down Buffy, it's really easy, and she just chloroforms her. And I think a lot of this is just the surprise factor of she didn't expect her mom to do violence against her. But I really feel like somebody should tell Spike that chloroform is Buffy's weakness.
Surprisingly, that's their weakness.
By the way, we still haven't talked about those children, and so clearly they're tangible because they're holding a bottle of chloroform, clearly marked.
No, the chloroform is on the staircase. It's on the banister.
Oh.
And they're hovering by the banister.
Oh, he's not holding it? I thought he was holding it.
I could be wrong.
And chloroform's illegal in this country, isn't it?
Mm.
You can't just get it.
Doctor?
But no, you definitely can't just buy it. You got to make it. But you can make it, but
Okay.
it's not like you go to a shop and buy some chloroform.
There's a funny episode of Community where they are using chloroform. I recommend that if you like chloroform humor. Because they keep trying to knock somebody out and they keep making mistakes. So like, all right, we'll do it right this time. And the guy's like, wait a second, but why are you here? And they're like, ah.
My sister was in Brazil doing science with Brazilian scientists, and one of her lab coworkers stole some chloroform because they still use that, I guess, in Brazil to put the mice out. But one of her lab partners stole it to get high.
Wow.
It really freaked my sister out that was apparently a cool thing to do in Brazil, or at least the one person it was.
Did she join?
No, she did not.
Oh,
At least that's the version of the story my sister told me. Maybe in real life, who knows?
Hmm.
I don't think so. We'll have her on the show one time and we can grill her. She's a big fan.
Yeah, we definitely got to ask this question.
Make sure that she's on sodium pentothal when we ask, though. About chloroform. So Buffy can see the kids, but only when she's on chloroform. It's like only when she's about to pass out. What's going on with that?
I don't know. I feel like they can control when the kids can control who they're revealing themselves to and stuff.
That's what I think.
Because Joyce can clearly see him.
Right, and they're even in the room, I guess, when Buffy is going to, to confront her mom earlier, about the insanity. When they've got the Never Again posters everywhere. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And they cut out to the act break and the two kids are saying, "You're doing a great job, Joyce." So the next thing here, it seems like there's a missed opportunity to find out if people are witches by doing witch tests. I guess finding a witch thing in your locker is enough. I mean, I don't. They're doing the Salem witch trials thing-ish, but they're not going all in on Salem witch trials in the way that they could. It's definitely more mass hysteria, and then they jump to the conclusion, and then it's and we'll probably talk about this more, but
there's a lot of due process missing in this particular episode. I think we'll probably get into that, but it's not just the witch tests as the only thing that we are using to then.
I mean, where's this police investigation going, right? It's
the police in Sunnydale, they're deeply stupid.
They're only available for looting lockers, apparently.
Yeah.
Elizabeth,
that would have been an intense scene of them stabbing somebody for to see if they bleed as a witch test, or drowning Willow or whatever. That would have been
looking for the witch nipple. Yeah. So Elizabeth, you have the next two here.
Where are the police or any particular person of authority in it? It's just a bunch of, it's clearly just moo or poo. That's together dealing with this. There's nobody, and somehow they have access to City Hall to do this, which leads me to the next point. It's why are they burning people inside?
Yeah,
they're
that's
burning people
incredibly crazy.
They're clearly already bonkers to do this in the first place, but then they're you know what, let's do a good old-fashioned burning. We'll do it inside City Hall.
And Oz and Xander in the air ducts during that burning would totally just die, right?
That's a good point.
I don't know where Xander and Oz are after this last adventure, but we haven't seen them.
Wait a second though, because if that's an outlet duct and there's a positive airflow of fresh air coming through that duct from the other side, and it's pushing smoke out, maybe it might be safe.
So then that room would be really smoky, right?
Yes. Well, yes, the room should be full. They're in, regardless of the HVAC situation, they have 3 massive bonfires in.
Dennis, you have the next 4 kind of comments here.
I say, who needs a push-up bra when you have steak and rope? Am I right? Am I right? Nobody likes my cleavage talk on this show.
I like it. Yeah, she was very.
That should be a segment.
Sarah Michelle Gellar's cleavage. Like every
This is
episode
cleavage
has
porn.
a different
It
component.
has its ups and downs.
The boob room with Dennis.
I'm just saying it's a noticeable part of the show, and I feel like you guys get upset whenever I bring it up, but it's there.
It's clearly designed to be. It's front and center.
That's right.
They're not
Thank
hiding it. They're not hiding it. They're making it quite obvious every time. Like, you notice her boobs for a reason.
That's
and you
right.
can definitely tell that they, again, stake in a rope, better than a push-up bra, totally accurate. I feel like next time I go out, I'm just going to get stake in a rope. Forget about a bra.
So this is the Salem style. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for being on this podcast.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Really putting the tit in Tituba.
So then I say, are those Giles's books being burned? I don't know if they are or not. I assume his books were being held there, right?
I think we're meant to believe they are. That said, they looked like most of his books are these like massive manuscript things that they go through, and they look just like novels.
Yeah, I didn't see any like leather-bound books in those piles or 13th century.
That's going to be a big problem for Giles later. Like,
yeah.
and if it wasn't, what the hell is it?
It's just, I guess maybe a lot of books were confiscated, not just from the school library, but maybe those are the public library books. I say, I love Cordelia with a fire hose. She's really funny, like getting way into spraying the people while Willow is on fire. And like in general, that I like that Cordelia goes through an arc this episode of like, at first she's on the mob's side, and then she only turns when it like affects her directly, right?
Yeah.
Cordelia. And then I say, second comically large staking of the season. The first is when they use the 2x4 on Tostitos, or kissing toast.
Tostitos.
And this one is even larger.
In the neck, too. That's like,
There was also that staking where I think they got two guys at once or something. That was
With
kind
the
of
umbrella stand. Yeah. I almost considered that one, but then I was like, I actually think that one's pretty badass, not comical. But yeah.
What did you think about this monster, Dennis? Because you always have monster opinion. He's only on for like 3 shots.
Yeah, it was only on for 3 shots. I thought it was good monster makeup. I do kind of like the thing of this episode is about something else other than the demon, right? And the demon is just this weird thing facilitating it.
Right.
I mean, I have a lot of questions about how this thing works, whether the 2 kids can like separate or not, like what the physics, the magic physics of it are. But I think the makeup looks really good.
They eventually are named from the 1650s, but like, was that the original demon? Was that like?
Yeah, the demon itself doesn't get a name; just the kids are Hansel and Gretel. Yeah, I don't know.
All right, well, we're going to move on then to questions for the group. Speaking of questions, so this section we just have kind of more general questions that this episode inspired. So questions for the group. So my first one here, did your parents ever try to awkwardly take an interest in your hobbies? I actually can say my parents, have never taken interest in my hobbies. They've tried to create my hobbies, but not take an interest in the hobbies I cultivated on my own. So like my parents definitely tried to direct me towards singing a lot when I was in high school, towards piano and theater. And I mean, I like those things, but like, I think I felt more directed towards those things. Like those were those classes my parents set up for me. Oh, you're going to go to this theater camp, that kind of thing.
But you were good at all those things, though, Mike.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you.
His parents were right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was a little bit directed into those things. But I never had that moment though where Buffy has, where Mom's like, "I'm taking interest in your thing." Like,
Oh yeah, I definitely have. I have a really distinct memory of like in middle school, my dad being like, "So, tell me the entire history of Wolverine."
First of all, that's a tall order for anyone.
Yeah. And that later turned out to be a trick to be like, see, Dennis, you can pay attention. You should be doing better in history class.
Oh, that's a dirty trick.
But
I think when parents pay attention, it's dirty tricks.
yeah, I think my folks tried to pay attention to me and stuff. My mom would always do things like I really liked The Tick, and so for years she would quote "spoon," and it was always like a little embarrassing and stuff to be like have people over for dinner, and she'd be like "spoon."
I don't remember her doing that, but that's really sweet.
Yeah.
I was one of those. I was basically involved in I was involved in so many extracurriculars, and I think in general, that was just my parents were just glad that I wasn't around the house. And so it was more just like, oh, good, she's busy doing her thing, and I was a good kid, so I didn't really get into trouble. I was just constantly busy, and as long as I kept it up, then yeah, they didn't really ask a lot of questions. The times that they would, I think it's like what Dennis said is when they're trying to make a point. I remember my dad pulling me out one day and asking me questions about geometry, and I hated it. I was totally getting a D, and basically pulled me aside to talk about some marching band stuff. By the way, marching band was a requirement. If you wanted to be in music, you had to be in marching band. It was talking about well, you can march and you can do these steps and make these formations. Why can't you be better at geometry? And I was like, I don't think that there's total parity in these ideas, but thanks.
If I had a geometry coach who was like, take 3 steps, turn right.
Exactly.
That's like the dorky version of see, hip hop is poetry. It's see, marching band is just geometry with a rhythm.
You know who's the world's greatest rapper? William Shakespeare.
Oh, John, you're so up in the teaching game. That's awesome. What about you, John? You have a cool dad.
Yeah, my parents are really cool. I don't think this question applies to me because I took an interest in my parents' hobbies, not the other way around.
Whoa! Flip the script. John flipped the script early on.
Because most of my interests are versions of my parents' interests that I got from them, I think.
Your dad's at circuit bending stuff?
My dad did.
Rock
No,
music.
my dad did do electronics in college for a little while. He majored in that, and that did actually help me get into doing electronics. My dad brought the first computer home, and got me excited about technology. My mom's an artist, and so any interest in art I had was pretty facilitated by the fact that my mom was always bringing arty farty types around and poets and stuff to the house. And I mainly took an interest in my parents' hobbies, not the other way around.
You never went through, you're like, I'm all about business now, Mom.
No, I never had one of those. Liz did that. My sister did that. My sister went through a rebellious preppy phase for a little while.
Oakwood will facilitate that.
Yes, it will. Not for me though. Yeah, I never rebelled against my parents because they're too cool.
All right, Travis, how about you?
Yeah, no, my parents took an interest in my swimming. They also facilitated my nerdy interests with Star Wars and video games. They were definitely facilitators there, but didn't ask questions about it. But
Right, they're like, here's a Star Wars.
yeah, well, yeah. But not facilitating.
So next big question from Dennis.
What's the story with people getting skinned in this town? During Joyce's speech, she's like, how many of us have lost a friend who just disappeared, or neck ruptures, or getting skinned?
Go fish.
Getting skinned.
Go fish.
The fish, yeah,
Go
fish.
fish, baby.
There.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't recall that coming up very much.
I
But
think
yeah, go fish.
Joyce herself got a neck rupture, right?
She got stabbed with a barbecue fork.
Yep. Isn't that amazing? Oh, man, that's amazing. I wish she would have mentioned Pat. And she's like, I had this best friend who just
Yeah, why didn't she mention Pat? That's a good point.
Or Ritter, right? Like, or Ted.
Yeah, Ted.
Does she know Ted's a robot? He would the guy who just disappeared, right?
I think she knew he was a robot, didn't Buffy?
She didn't in that episode because Joyce didn't know yet about the world, but she might at this point.
After Buffy found out after Joyce found out Buffy was the Slayer, do you think that they had like a mother-daughter conversation to revisit the Ted story? Because I feel like that's got to make all kinds of new sense to Joyce upon rethinking about it. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I don't think that the whole idea is like, this is a thing though, like the parents don't talk about it. Like,
right.
It's just completely close your eyes, pretend it doesn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely one of the themes.
Selective amnesia.
Yeah.
So next question. Willow's mom is in this episode. What do we think of Willow's mom?
I thought this was such an interesting character because it feels in a way like it's almost like a stock character, but I don't know that there's a ton of representation of this where like Willow's mom apparently is some kind of academic. I guess she's in psychology would be her field, but she clearly like studies child development and intellectualizes her kid and wants to talk about her child's development, but has no actual interest in her own child, which is a really interesting thing.
Yeah, so she's like clearly a hypocrite, which is a lovely, simple character, right? Where she studies a thing and she can talk about it. And I mean, it's really funny to see her so objective about her kids' stuff, where she's like, "Oh, you're into this stuff. It's just kind of icky. I wish you were something a little less gross, but it makes sense for you to be into this stuff."
Yeah. Oh, and the whole thing of like her not knowing Buffy's name feels very like frustrating and real, right?
Yeah, that stuff felt really real. I was a little annoyed by the trope of the tiresome feminist who like over intellectualizes things when she comes down on Mr. Rogers. That felt like a really tired joke to me. It's also like 50% of the jokes on Community, which is why like I couldn't enjoy that show as much as maybe some people.
I that was a laugh out loud joke for me. That Mr. Rogers thing that came out of nowhere for me. It was so good.
I really love Mr. Rogers.
I'd say it wasn't so much the content of that joke as like the reference was so powerful. Like, it was fantastic. It made me feel much more stronger connection to Willow. Like, oh yeah, we're peers, sort of.
I probably can't ask this. I mean, do we even see? Have we seen her mom before?
No.
And I don't. I mean.
Well, I've already written down my predictions, so you're welcome to say it. I don't think Willow's mom. I think she's going to continue to ignore Willow, but like I don't know. I don't think she's going to come back and be in another episode.
That's a good.
Have we seen her father before?
No, this is the first parent outside of Buffy's parents.
Okay.
And Mike has an outstanding prediction about never seeing Xander's parents, right? But I don't think you said Willow's parents.
He hasn't said either way about Willow's parents. There's been predictions about Willow's pets, but not about her parents.
Well, which I lost. All right.
You lost that one.
Yeah, the fish are gone.
Yep.
I like your point about the over intellectualization of her mom being this feminist character. That it's like, she also though doesn't ever let her daughter finish a sentence. Like she interrupts every single thing that she says, and it's like, she might just be a bad feminist.
She could just be a bad person.
There is that.
Yeah, I think she's just a bad person. I think that there is a trope on TV about tiresome feminists who like sort of ruin things by overanalyzing them, and I think it's not a joke that's funny anymore to me.
Yeah,
probably wasn't funny in the 90s either.
Yeah.
So any other Willow thoughts, or move on? Willow's mom thoughts?
I want to talk about parents more, but not about Willow's mom specifically.
Perfect. So I have a question here that's just like, how does this monster work? Right? So like, I don't fully understand the Hansel and Gretel monster. So as I understand it, and Dennis, please, this is like a you and me, let's figure this out.
All right.
There's a monster that manifests either as or creates two kids who are dead. They're dead bodies, or that lie still and can appear dead. And then it chooses a person or persons in order to lead cause to get revenge for the murder of those two kids, a warrantless murder.
Yeah.
And it manifests and gives instructions to a person about what to do. And then
it guides.
And then it guides and then gains power somehow just for the sheer pleasure of having mass hysteria of some kind happen where people are murdered. So it's like trying to create a world where people, are murdered.
Yeah. Yep. So it's like,
go ahead, sorry.
So it feeds on like either like the feelings of mass hysteria that the crowd gives it, or it feeds off the deaths of innocent people. And it's weird to me that it's like so focused on being like, I like the thing of that they're Hansel and Gretel, and it's a twist on the Hansel and Gretel tale. So instead of like the witch being the bad guy, it's that the kids were never really real to begin with, right? But like, so this demon is only Hansel and Gretel, so like it's not you couldn't blame the demon for like other things that have happened in American history besides Salem Witch. Like you couldn't be like, well, this demon is responsible for like all the lynchings in the South or something like that.
Right, yeah, and I would have asked about
that. Like more cases in real like American history of like innocent people being like burned or
so I mean this show has decided not to do that, but for example, like the War of the Worlds broadcast created mass hysteria. Clearly this witch could have been involved in that, right?
Yeah.
This monster. The idea that there'd be like razor blades and Halloween candy, right? Like could be involved in that.
The occult hysteria of the 80s or whatever.
Yeah, right. Satanic panic, all that stuff. Like that would give that monster pleasure just doing that. It's less McCarthyism, no, right? That's a different thing. It's too political.
Different demon.
There's a cat butt on the screen right now.
Oh, isn't there?
Let me angle that a little better there for you. There you go.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so for the YouTube audience. So Travis, so like this is kind of a weird monster. They've taken a Hansel and Gretel kind of as the seed idea, and then Salem Witch Trials, and just kind of awkwardly combined them into like what is a satisfying episode in a lot of ways, but like the demon itself doesn't really work for me. Like I'm confused about it. Like I think, and I make a prediction about this, or I will, that like we're gonna see more fairy tale demons, but like this is like a fairy tale mishmash. And
I think part of it is what the show likes to do, or what the show's trying to do a lot of the times, is it takes the fairy tale or the myth, and turn it on its head, right? That's like part of their mission statement is like we're not going to have vampires that are just fangs. We're going to have vampires that are all forehead bumpy, and like we're going to do a mummy, but it's not going to be an Egyptian mummy, right?
We're going to do a Christmas Carol, but we're not going to make it 3 ghosts. We're going to make it, but like
just a pile of ghosts.
Pile of ghosts.
So it's like part of like how this show tries to like twist its like normal archetypes of monsters, right? But those, the show also never super pays close attention to the monsters, right? It's always like, but I'm more interested in Buffy and Joyce, like, and their relationship, right? So it's always a thing that's a little bit frustrating when you're into the monsters on this show, of like how it only like half gives you what you want. Like,
well, it's like monsters can be really strong metaphors, for a thing, and they're like, cool, here's the metaphor we want, and they're not filling in all the gaps to make it completely work.
Yeah.
So it's like it's there enough as a background so you can have all of the funny characters and dialogue and scenes, but the monster is broken. And I feel like it was true of the Christmas Carol one with the first evil also. Broken monster, amazing story.
Yeah.
Like I see what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, for some reason,
could have been the first also. They could have just brought
back the first would have just
should have done the first,
did you see? Yeah.
So I thought this was basically a demon that wanted to get retribution on witches, and then it manifests the Hansel and Gretel tale to exact that retribution. That was my thinking of, why is this happening? It must not have said that this was a demon that was wronged by witches or killed by witches. That's what I thought was going on. That's why I thought it came back every 50 years.
Yeah, I mean, it never says that.
It never says it explicitly. I'm just trying to rationalize why does this happen.
Yeah,
I think that's a really good point. I got really annoyed with the first evil because it's like, oh, that's the first evil ever to exist, and that's all you got. Like, I feel like it's had time to manifest itself a little bit better. And from a story writing perspective, they kind of lost a good opportunity to have the first evil, because like I feel like mass hysteria is kind of one of the ways that evil really does manifest in a very insidious way that could have been just a, like, they didn't have to kill the first evil in one episode. This is kind of what I'm saying. Like, they had an opportunity to really make that a good recurring thing to fight, and they could have done that here, but they chose not to. So
yeah, and I think there's a lot more. I think you're totally right that the thing about mass hysteria that could be more interesting to explore is that everybody who's involved in this, like in the burning of the witch or whatever, thinks that they're righteous, right? That they're so caught up in it, they don't see they're on the wrong side. And that's something to explore on a show like this that has demons and has like literal evil, right? To like, you're not killing the demon, you're killing like the innocent people. And maybe we can explore that more. I don't know.
I think that could be explored in the future.
All right, cool. So we'll move on to the next question here. Travis, I feel like you kind of talked about this retribution thing a little bit.
Yeah, we're done. Yeah, with that. Yeah.
Okay. So Elizabeth, you want to talk about Joyce's speech? Yeah.
So is this her way of trying to take back her parental control? Because like when she's saying like, you know, this town is for the monsters and the slayers. Like, first of all, there's only 2 slayers. Okay. So like,
and one of them isn't even in this episode.
One of them's not in this episode, and the other one's your daughter. So is she that desperate, like, for her life to be normal? That, and this goes back to like how this monster manifests, right? So like, are they under a spell? Like, do they put these people under a spell? Or is this just the fervor of the mass hysteria whipping them and finally saying like, yep, let's kill our kids. That sounds like a great idea. And so is she just more susceptible to this demon because of her, like, she's almost feels like she's being pushed out of Buffy's life. She's not necessary as a mom. We've seen already that her mom is kind of like this role reversal and like, it's okay, Mom. I wish you didn't have to see these dead kids, Mom. Like,
well, when you say it like that, I feel like, you know, you're absolutely right. Like, the whole town wants to return to being normal. And this is like, this hysteria is like, yeah, we'd like an end to the vampires and the bullshit, right? Though you're totally right also. It's like, yeah, so the town would like to reassert control, and then Joyce would also like to have control over her kid, right? Like the trick that Dennis is talking about with the dad that's like, oh, tell me about Wolverine. It's like, oh, this is what you do. Like, Joyce is probably already planning something.
But she goes about it in such a shitty way.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, basically telling her like, you're doing a terrible job as the Slayer. I mean, we don't even need to get into like the Watchers Council's role and all of that, because this doesn't come up. but yeah, like, I mean, she totally tears down her daughter in every way, shape, and form in this episode.
Yeah,
and it starts at the beginning.
You can say Joyce was definitely under the spell at that point, and she probably was under the spell before anyone else, right? Because she found the bodies first, so she's probably under the spell from that point on. But
we saw her staring at the bodies when the cops came in the exact same position. I don't know who called the cops and why suddenly cops were called. Since when did cops get called in Sunnydale?
You think if Joyce was there, Buffy would have just like buried the bodies and be like, time to investigate, like cut off the hands to show Giles. But like, I think that she is under the spell, but the spell is manifesting all of the issues Joyce already has. It's feeding those issues to her as larger. Turning it up to 11. Yeah.
Well, one thing we didn't talk about was when Joyce
when
Joyce first shows up at the school, she's like, Buffy, I had such terrible dreams last night. I thought to myself, maybe Mama Joyce has kind of Buffy's strange magical dreaming powers, or that maybe that's how things get amplified.
That's when the ghosts are in her brain.
Yeah. I was like, oh God, those dreams.
Yeah, I guess that is kind of where they're saying like, this is where she's been infiltrated, was in her dreams the previous night. Interesting.
Yeah, but there's a good analysis of what's going on with Joyce and of bringing it to the like being upset about or the role reversal that happened, like trying to get the power. But you know, at the point where you're like punishing your daughter by setting her on fire, you've gone too far as a parent.
Have you though? Is that the
Well, I'm not
limit?
a
Is that the limit?
Right.
Is there anything ahead of time that we could maybe that could be like
Well,
you know, ahead of time?
Grounding is fine, right?
Okay.
And
Listen,
then what's
a lot of corporal punishment's not going to work on a slayer.
Yeah, chloroform burned at the
So-
stake.
Chloroform.
After
Oh God.
that. The next is a question for Dr. Travis. Dennis Allman asked this one here. Should you slap a head trauma patient until they're awake? Just curious, dear Dr. Travis.
This might come up in my daily life.
You definitely should not. I like how it comes up in your daily life. I like how Cordelia, you know, pseudo predicts the chronic traumatic encephalopathy, the CTE, in professional health players. It's not mentioned for another decade. And then she's like, you know, all this repeated head trauma, you're going to wake up in a coma, or, you know, she didn't say the right words, but she's like, calls out repeated head trauma is not a good thing, which is just so amazing.
I'm glad she finally called it out, though. It was
Oh, yeah.
getting a little extreme.
Well, you know, they were coming up with all these excuses to get Giles out of every episode for some reason. So they hit him on the head, goes on vacation, like all this stuff.
He's a teacher. He can't afford that many vacations. Clearly, it has to be head trauma.
I don't have that many vacation days. Just knock me the fuck out.
Or it needs to be an alternate dimension. There you go. That's another way to get Giles. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And then the next question is for Dr. Landis, I believe.
Hello.
That's right. I say, what kind of 90s share screen program were Oz and Willow using?
Oh, I looked at that. That's crazy. I was trying to figure out what browser they were using. It's some kind of crazy full screen browser program that makes no sense.
But AOL, like AIM was a thing in 99.
Yes.
So, I mean, obviously they weren't using AIM, but they could have been.
Are they
And then, like,
sharing their
dropping
screen,
links or
or are they just on the same website?
I thought they were sharing their screen because Oz said something like that. He's like, we're hooked up. We'll see what she sees. Or something like that.
Yeah. Well, Willow is on her PowerBook. She's on a Mac, and Giles's computer looks like an IBM from the 80s. Like, it's really clunky looking.
I had that same computer when I started college. Okay, it's not that old. Thank you very much.
Wait, which one? The laptop?
I had no idea.
No,
you were
the
20 years older than
desktop.
all of us.
No, the desktop. I think, yeah. Probably shouldn't have said that. I went to college the same year as you did, so.
Okay, I got the line here. Oz says, we don't need a phone. Okay, we're linked.
I
Yeah.
think at that time they definitely
So I
needed.
guess, yeah, it's some kind of screen sharing. When was RDP invented? I don't know.
It's a black and white photograph, gains resolution slowly. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the article, like you could see it immediately, but the photo of the kids took forever to load.
You know, first of all, that is totally not how it worked, as we all know, because there'd be a paywall for any newspaper article from 1899.
Well, I like that. Yeah.
Back then.
Somebody scanned in a newspaper article from like 1649 also.
A German article in English.
the Sunnydale News website.
So Terminal Services came out with Windows NT, which I think would have been out at this time. But the
Just
first
share ISP.
the first version of RDP, as we know it, was not really out until Windows 2000. It looks like, so that probably would not have been out yet. But
How much did we say Willow's laptop cost? Was it $5,000?
yeah, we think I don't remember. I looked it up. Yeah, that is I think it's like 5,000 in adjusted dollars, like adjusted for inflation. It was. Yeah, Willow has a very serious PowerBook.
She's got a kick-ass laptop.
Yeah.
But she also has parents that completely ignore her, and she gets straight A's. So I think that's where the PowerBook come from.
I bet it's
Oh,
her
yeah.
mom's.
Yeah, no doubt.
Parental guilt right there.
Do we want to talk about the spell again? I think we got this kind of thing. Travis, you have the next question here. Which is like jumping ahead of a prediction that I totally have. But
Okay, yeah, let's skip
Please.
let's skip that then. Let's skip it and just do your prediction.
No, I actually do think we should talk about that point though.
Okay.
Like there's no connection between the supposedly murdered children and these teenagers. Like
that point. Sorry. Yeah.
I don't know who made that particular note.
So the question here is like, what's the connection between the murdered kids and teens and are the adults under a spell? I think they're under a spell of some kind.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Well, they're under a spell, but why those, like,
Well,
is it just these are the teens they could get their hands on?
Yeah, because these teens are the like
The witches.
They're the out and proud witches of the town, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Presumably in Sunnydale, there's other witches hanging out, like a shit ton. But these kids are really just
Accessible.
Everybody knows. Like obviously, like everybody knows Buffy's a Slayer, right? Like that was indicated that the jocks were afraid of her. Like it's the people who are living their lives out and proud, different from the mainstream, that get attacked in these things. So I asked, do you think der Kinderstad, who's the demon in the hospital episode that kills children, and Hansel Gretel demon knew each other? I ask because they're German demons that immigrated to America and Sunnydale at some point, and they both have the big overbites. So I think they might be related.
Nice.
And that's all I got.
I mean, I don't know. There's no demon social club as far as I'm aware, so I don't know how they would hang out.
Germany's a big country, Dennis. It's not like all German demons know each other.
I just wanted to know which they each were. I didn't mean to interrupt your
No.
intro.
And they both also have like special invisibilities and are focused on kids in some weird way.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're just similar demons, although one wears a hat and the other wears nothing.
Yeah, he was like half naked.
Pretty gross. How's Giles's German, Mike?
Oh, I mean, it's all fine. It's the regular sloppy German that everybody has. It's fine. My pronunciation is terrible. Let's go back. I'm just being silly. It's fine. I think, doesn't he just say Hansel and Gretel? What else does he say?
I feel like
He like does a spell at him in German when he like makes them appear again, doesn't he?
Well, let me bring up that section. I'll tell you what it says.
It just must be. I feel for like if you're used to being able to pull up reference for everything and you can't do it anymore, and you're like, I gotta actually remember how to do this thing. I gotta actually remember the spell. Fuck.
Oh, and do you want me to tell you? You know why I forgot. I should have told you guys why. Whenever they say something in one of these funny languages like Latin or other languages, it's always the real thing because they basically write down what they want to say in English and then the studio pays a translator. So that's why there's nothing silly hidden in the.
Okay, so here it is. So something like demons show yourselves. Oh, I think I'm calling on the power of Queen Hecate.
Yeah, Queen.
Who's protecting of the witches.
Hecate is the goddess that Amy calls on.
I was going to say, Hecate has been invoked several times.
The masks are going. The masks are going away, and the evils have a face of. The evil has an evil face.
Have we heard the line from Xander where he says Hecate, or he says enough with all the Hecate already? Was that in the
that's in The Witch, isn't it? Enough with the Hecate, yeah. I think
there's a line I really like later on that's like Hecate hates that. Oh,
oh man.
All right.
Is that why?
Oh, go ahead.
Nope, you good.
No, do it.
Is this a spoiler? Because what I just said was a vague spoiler.
Oh, cool. Then, all right. So, Dennis, you have the next kind of question here about Amy.
Yeah. Do you think Amy meant to turn herself into a rat?
I assumed yes, but now that you mention it, maybe not.
Because, I mean, she is a teen witch. They can make mistakes.
And she used the exact spell offensively before, or her mom did?
Yeah.
In her body?
No, that was her.
Oh, that was her. Oh.
That was when she's a witch and she's in love with Xander.
Oh, that's right. Oh, I screwed that up in the summary. I remember that from the wrong episode.
I think she meant to turn herself. I think she knew that was her best way of escaping. But I like that Buffy's like, or Willow's like, you couldn't have done us first. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, because she couldn't turn everybody in the room into a witch or into a rat necessarily, because there was a lot of people she would have had to turn into a rat,
That's
and then
true.
she'd still be tied up. It wouldn't have helped.
I don't know. She could have just turned Joyce into and Joyce is the leader. Just
Yeah.
turn Joyce. The whole mob could change.
I mean, I think turning everyone else into a rat would work. But as we know, turning back will be scandalous when that happens, whenever it happens.
Is that why Hecate was like, didn't change her back because she'd already been caught on too many times by Giles and her in one thing? She's like, look, I'm tired. I'm tired. You guys have already asked too much of me this day.
I also feel like Willow would just have a better chance of the spell working if she would put on like a persona, but she's just like reading the lines. She's just being Willow. Like you got to be like,
Put your heart and soul into that.
to really make your magic work, right? No wonder it's not working. And also, where's boy witch Michael in this? That would have helped.
Oh yeah,
He's
hiding.
probably hiding in Giles's office.
Yeah.
Like,
Terrified of the world.
Maybe he's just done being a witch. He's like, look,
Not
It's not
worth it.
yeah.
Not worth it, bro.
Well, that is the end of our group questions. We're going to move on now to themes and deep stuff. These are the more episode-related, the heavy questions that this episode brings out. So we'll start off with John. You have the first question here.
All right. Joyce gives her speech, and I can't be the only one who thinks this, that Joyce has a lot of good points in this episode, even though she's crazy.
Sure.
Like, first of
Just because
all,
people have good points, though, doesn't make them like right. Like you can use
Yeah.
social truths.
but there are takeaways that are not taken away by Buffy and the gang. I feel like that. So she points out, like, so first of all, she's the only one who actually does seem genuinely upset that there are dead children. I mean, she's right that Buffy is really shrugging that off and doesn't seem to care. And she's upset by it. And she points out, like, why keep that a secret? Who does it serve to keep any of this a secret? If there was public information about vampires and that if you just stay inside in your house, you will not get eaten, there is no downside to that. There's no downside to people talking about it.
I think though Buffy does make the point though of like, yeah, these kids are innocent, but like the guy who works at the bank, he
so is
deserves
Mr.
it.
Sandeman.
Well, right, which I think that's on Joyce's side. That point is on Joyce's side.
No,
I think that's
just
two
think-
different points you're making, though.
I just
Like-
think if like the thing of like Buffy shrugs off the deaths, I think to her she feels all the deaths equally.
Okay.
You can't if
That's
you're
true.
going to be fighting in a war with vampires nightly, you can't like be like devastated every night, right?
That's fair. That's fair.
Well, and the whole idea of like staying in every night. I mean, I think we saw that in The Wish, that's not a good situation either. You don't want to have that have to happen. But public awareness, I do think that public awareness, especially on a Hellmouth, I'm not saying like you make national broadcasts, but public awareness on a Hellmouth might be helpful.
But explain to me, like, why not make national? Like, why not have, like, why not put it on Nightline? Why not actually
Mass
have a discussion
hysteria,
about it?
dogs and cats sleeping together.
I mean, it's not hysteria if
Because
it's
that's
real.
because that's the fucking show, John.
But, like, I know, but like, okay, if there really are monsters eating people on the regular, then a lot of you shouldn't burn witches, right? But like, it's not crazy to suggest you might do something about that, or at least discuss it.
Well, I think they're kind of on the precipice of the big conversation happening, right? Because this is the first time it's happened. And then we've seen The Wish where, in a world without Buffy, like clearly it's been discussed. There's curfews. You don't go to this part of town. Like there is some kind of conversation, even locally. So
Right.
It's like, I think it's society on the precipice of having the conversation. Like things, it's, you want to say a phrase from this year, the new normal is X,
Yeah.
Like they haven't accepted this as the normal thing yet. And so that acceptance is a challenge. So they haven't discussed it. And it's like they're about to, or the show is about to address that, after 3 seasons or whatever. So it definitely does need to be addressed that this isn't like a normal thing. But
Right.
like, what Dennis says is like, yeah, it's so true. Like it's a show, and if the show addresses it, it becomes a different show.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Because then it could be about these national events, and like it sort of does get addressed. Like, so for instance, when the secret agents come and they're like, in the Invisible Girl, they recruit her, right? There's some national awareness. You know, there's like an X-Files-y kind of vibe to this area. Like,
I love that episode.
I think that Sunnydale is a special place where this stuff is happening. Though, I guess in the Wish universe, right? Like Giles is calling Cleveland, right? So it's like this thing is apparently contained to this area, and then it could expand and get worse. But then Faith is also, you know, like fighting her way across the country. So
there's
like,
no reason to think it's contained to Sunnydale. There's reason to think it's worse in Sunnydale than on average. But there's no reason to think it's contained to Sunnydale. And in fact, we know that all of our vampires have led vampire lives in other cities. We know,
in Ireland and stuff like that.
Like,
and yet we have 2 Slayers living in Sunnydale. One of them is just slumming in a motel.
This is the other thing that Joyce says, is that like, how much good are you doing really? Which I think is a legitimate question.
Although we know from The Wish how much good she's doing. Like
we know how
Buffy
much she's
doesn't know
doing.
this, so.
Again, we know how much good she's doing in Sunnydale.
Dude,
but
I don't know what's going on with you lately. It's psychotic that you that you are questioning our beloved leader and her struggle against the night monsters.
But like, you know, I think her point is valid, especially I think it really is a critique of the Watchers Council that Buffy as a resource is not deployed in any way strategically.
So the Watchers Councils can go on retreats, but they can't give their Slayer, theoretically a single Slayer, a stipend. Maybe like to live somewhere other than a shitty motel room.
Or in her mom's house.
Or
they
like
really need to be funding the Slayers. It's ridiculous.
I think
but then with national awareness of conversation where people know about Slayers, maybe they would get some funding. Like you could get it from the national government.
Joyce's point, I think, sort of
that would just be regulation and red tape.
Handling this with a single hero makes no sense compared to the idea of handling it as a community.
But
yes,
Buffy isn't a single community. You know, she isn't a single person. She has her friends, right? That's like which we discussed. But a larger.
But no Slayer ever has. That's what makes her so successful. Mm-hmm. Is like Slayers always die young, and granted, she's still young. Some Slayers, you know, but there's a reason why like they're tapping people that are 15, 16 years old because like all the other Slayers that you've already tapped are dead.
Yep.
Because they have no community. They have no one to like help them with it. And Buffy has a community, and Joyce is just I'm with you, John. Joyce is just kind of pushing to this next level of like, hey, we should get the actual community involved in this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously she crosses a line into Crazy Town when she decides to burn people at the stake or whatever. But like, I think that the larger thing I don't know. This episode as a teacher really got to me because there's this and I know that this episode is talking about some things that have literally happened, like satanic panic or just general anti-occult bullshit from so-called concerned parents or religious nut jobs or whatever. It's hard for me though not to read this as a metaphor for all kinds of things where I'm worried about kids. And so if you look at are
you worried that He-Man is a satanic show?
I'm not worried about He-Man, but like, you know, I do worry about kids growing up with social media, for example. And I think that's a good analogy, even though this is obviously not about social media per se, but like, there's this tension between looking at those things in terms of, they call it the protection empowerment sort of spectrum of like looking at technology, for example, as something that empowers young people versus looking at it as something that threatens them. And both of those things are true, like all the time. And I think this episode points out that when you look at things in terms of how do you protect kids, that puts you in an authoritarian mode. And it has all the problems that are, sort of inherent to being an authoritarian. But it's hard, like when you're an adult who works with kids, it's really hard not to be authoritarian when you're an authority, right? So I really felt for Joyce in this episode because a lot of the time I feel like that's a balance I'm trying to hit. Because as an example, one of the things I do in my job is we use a company to filter student email and report to us when they're using naughty words, right?
Oh my God.
Now again, and to be fair, the kids I'm talking about here are young. I mean, they're, we're talking about 4th to 7th grade, right, for that. And that's the kind of thing I think when I first started teaching that I would have thought was horrible and super 1984 and creepy. But on the other hand, there have been so many instances where we found out about a bullying situation or an abuse situation or a kid who needed help because a flag word came up on their email, right? Same thing with like surveillance cameras in schools, right? It's creepy to think that we're watching kids on cameras, but then when you have the instructable, teachable moment where like you bring a kid in and they're like, I didn't do anything, and you show them the video of themselves punching somebody in the head, that's actually really helpful. It's actually a really helpful tool. And when it's deployed in a way that is geared towards helping the kid and not as like, you know, like a punishment mechanism, I think all those things can be beneficial. I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to just say, you know, parents don't understand, which I think is the tone this episode strikes more than anything else. Mm-hmm. But like, it is the job of adults to protect children. And
so what do you think about the locker searching then?
Well, I do want to talk about the locker searching. So with high school students, I think that they absolutely, if you're asking my opinion, I think high school students have the right to a private locker. They should have the right to a private locker. I think they should be considered their private space, like Buffy says. Although the Supreme Court does not agree with that, by the way. So I looked this up. The relevant case, and this is what Snyder's talking about, I think. There was a Supreme Court case, New Jersey v. TLO. TLO is the initials of a student, from 1985, where a girl's purse was searched because she was suspected of something, and they found evidence that she was selling drugs at school. And she and basically her lawyer wanted to say that was not admissible because the school had no right to search her purse and her belongings. And the Supreme Court actually found that schools have the right to search students within some kind of test of reasonability. You have to have reasonable grounds to do it. And there's actually another case that came up in 2009 where a 13-year-old girl, this is horrible, by the way, a 13-year-old girl was strip searched down to her underwear because they thought she might have ibuprofen she wasn't supposed to have, and the Supreme Court found that was not a reasonable search, obviously, and sided with her on that one. And she won her civil case against her school.
So you're against the locker search.
Yeah.
But it is like literally it's legal and schools can do a locker search.
Yeah. I tried to figure this out. It does get a little more complicated in California. So I got into some California Supreme Court has other rulings, and there's some specific laws in California about student rights against searches. But from what I found on the California ACLU page, Snyder's search here was pretty much totally legal because it was random. And because they didn't single out, you can't single out a kid for searching without a reasonable suspicion is one of the tests they have. So like, I can't just choose to search Mike Poley because he's shifty, right? But if I have a reasonable reason to think Mike Poley is selling drugs and I think I'm going to find cocaine in his jacket, I have the right to search his jacket.
But it's also the police doing it, not the school.
That's true. They do it with the police. That's a good point. I think that does probably change the map a little bit. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer. If we have any lawyers in the audience who know about this stuff, they should contact us.
Please, no lawyers. We don't.
It's also interesting. Part of the test of reasonableness, though, is that they have to have a reasonable suspicion that someone's breaking the law or breaking the rules of the school. Mm-hmm. And if they're searching for witchy stuff, in order for that to be reasonable, there either has to be a law against that, or there has to have been like a pre-existing school rule against it.
I'm sure there's laws on the books against witches in Sunnydale.
So that I don't know.
Or a witch-related murder, for which you could get a warrant.
I guess that's true. If they think it's a murder weapon, there's like a murder weapon that they would find that's like a witchy murder weapon. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, it's funny. Like teenagers have been murdered a lot, but it's not only when it's children do the police get involved and like does it get serious.
So only when Moo pushes them.
Yeah.
Did anybody have their locker searched in high school? Because I did.
I don't think I did.
Yeah.
What were the circumstances, Elizabeth? I'm curious.
So this would be jumping ahead down these questions a little bit, but I had, this is like kind of going back to in April of 1999 after Columbine and the Columbine shooting and the Trenchcoat Mafia. I had my locker searched because I wore a trench coat, and anybody that wore a trench coat had their locker searched. And I wore a trench coat, so I went to the exact same high school that my mother went to. And my mother wore that exact same trench coat in the 60s when she graduated. And it was one of those that it was a rad coat. So I wore it. I was no longer allowed to wear the coat, and I got my locker searched. And I think I had The World According to Garp in there, which is a totally inappropriate book for any child to read. So but yeah, I was 15, 16 at that time, and had my stuff taken.
Wow.
Yeah, we wore trench coats in high school.
I thought we were going to get into this in a later episode, but we can get into this now.
We don't have to do this now if you don't want to, but
this is January of '99. Let's save it for April of '99.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think we've all had the experience of mass hysteria that followed Columbine for sure. You know, that just accelerated so many concerns. But
so that's a really good example, though, of I feel like if I was an adult at that time, it would not seem crazy to be suddenly worried, right? It would not seem crazy to, and the thing that this episode points out is that concern, you're gonna get it wrong, right? That because you're coming at it with this weird mixture of, strangely, a mixture of naivete and pessimism. You're pessimistic because you're imagining the worst possible thing is happening, but you're also totally naive about what kids are actually dealing with and the skills they may already have in dealing with it.
Yeah, but I guess I want to talk about just the symbol of the trench coat. So symbolically, the trench coat represents this trench coat mafia, and that the trench coat needs to be removed, and that's the problem. Well, we know it's the kids are the problem, and it's so much harder to see, right?
I was such a problem child. No.
I know you weren't, but it's
Well,
I'm sure, Dennis, you said you wore a trench coat. John, did you wear a trench coat?
We all did.
You guys all wore trench coats.
Yeah.
You guys were all good kids. Y'all were. I know.
We were okay.
Yeah, we were not.
We were good kids.
The kids who were
Yeah.
But if I've learned anything from playing games of
We're also the outcasts of our
Resistance and games where you have to guess who the traitor is that you are always wrong at first about who the traitor is, right?
Right.
I think
because when you first, what you said about you're always wrong if the first person you guess is going to be somebody you have a preconceived notion about, and it's not that random draw of the card about who's the werewolf or the spy or whatever.
And I think it's an unspoken thing in this episode that Michael is they come down on Michael probably because he seems effeminate or he seems gay.
Yeah,
and there's a gay bashing thing with Michael.
Gay and,
and it's not really because about the occult. They people's other prejudices have found an opportunity to come to the surface.
Yeah, totally.
It's goth kid.
It's goth. I think the reason that Joyce's tone deaf moo organization is because she's cared so little about Buffy, it feels like, and then all of a sudden you show up and you have, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that and do that, and you say you haven't been here for any of this, you really don't know what's going on, just because you're the adult, you're going to just change all the rules even though you haven't really been playing the game at all. That's why I think to me that's why the Joyce thing is funky.
Right, and that feels like the way school enforcement would happen too, right? It's you haven't been paying good attention to the kids, you haven't been connecting, and then you're cool, well, we're going to put a weapons screening, we're going to have a metal detector at the front of the school now. It's
spell detector.
Spell detector.
Mandrake root detector.
But in the video game version of where I run a school and I just press the button that adds a metal detector at the front, without talking to kids or the implications of it, that has a negative effect because now it's a greater chances of someone bringing a gun now that I've said that I don't want guns here because I'm saying that this is a place that might have guns. So you raise the threat level when you react to perceived threats when there are no threats. So it's dangerous. It's stupid to do if there's no reason to do it. I think I've complained. I mean, I haven't complained about this before, but my neighbors, right? I remember my neighbor talking to me. He was so happy. He was not happy, but he was proud because, he pointed a shotgun at someone who was moving around across the street in the kind of abandoned house next to us. The one that's being built. And he's like, yeah, there's someone prowling around there. And I showed him and he took off. I'm like, Like, yeah, I didn't know how to react. I'm like, I don't, no, please don't do that. Don't raise the perceived threat level.
Yeah,
Like,
God.
that's like you're changing the atmosphere when you do that. Now that, not that saying that person's going to smash a window or whatever later, but like you've made that person more scared to be in this neighborhood.
Yeah,
And like
just created an escalation. Yeah.
So like Moo escalates a conflict like to a level, right? And then it leads to people being burned at the stake. I think there's 4 hours of of content or a whole season of stuff that's missing before the stakes get put out. Or they chloroform Buffy way too soon, but they're under a spell. That's why.
Yeah, I think they got to tell the story in an hour. They don't have time for. If this was a modern TV show, this would be a full season. There would be an episode directed just towards all the witch tests.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. The other big problem with this is the Moo acts like all the problems in the town are from the kids, but the reality is all the problems are actually adults. It's not the kids in society, and that's the truism. Like for our society nowadays, the children did not create the problems of our society. They were created by the parents, the grandparents, and the great grandparents. So I think that's the other big problem here is that, we'll fix the kids. The kids are the problem. The kids were never the problem.
Yeah, but arguably the problem that the adults have more than anything is ignoring signs of that the kids are suffering. And
they're not addressing the real problems.
Oh, I agree with that, but I think
disciplining children.
Again, in real life, it's hard. It's extremely hard to know as the adult what actions are too heavy-handed. There's a really fine line there because you really don't know what the kids are going through. You really don't know how capable they are or not. I think that's an extremely difficult balance to strike.
I think the corollary for this episode is as Mike said, the gun metal detectors in schools. That's not the solution for school shootings. The solution for school shootings is limit access to gun and gun ownership.
Well, I think it's like we don't actually know the solution. I don't.
Right.
Like, I agree with you on gun ownership, but like there's so many problems with getting to the information about why why school shootings happen, because no one wants to accept responsibility that they missed something. The police don't want to accept responsibility that they miss something. The parents don't want to accept responsibility. And so people are more willing for them to be random and for us not to understand and get into it because they don't want the blame to reflect back on them.
That's right.
So like you have to do such an intense investigation that I think has yet to happen even for shootings because no one wants to look back at themselves and make themselves responsible. Like that there's you get to the crazy conspiracy explanations and other stuff, like getting to the where did the kids come from? Like it turns out it's an insanely complicated and hard to understand monster that like, once every 50 years we sort of understand. We're at the beginning of understanding how this monster works. We don't understand its true motivations. We think that it might get power from scaring people. Like and this is like my theory here, I think the monster is like the school shooter that's like so hard to comprehend and like they're attacking at it from completely the wrong angle.
Mm-hmm.
And like we need to interrogate the monster, not kill it. Then Buffy kills the monster before we can even discover its true motives. Like we'll never know. That was fun.
Yeah, this is I don't know how you guys feel. I feel like we could skip the rest of themes pretty much because we've been really heavily talking about it for a while now.
Well, then we should just at least say the one thing I would say is that we hear the mission statement for Buffy. Angel Buffy talk, and the reason why do we fight? It's not to win, because we fight because there's something worth fighting for. So I think I would just highlight that.
Okay. Yeah.
So this is like the mission statement for the show.
All right, so we're going to wrap up themes and we'll move on to predictions. Okay, so let's move on here to predictions. So are there any predictions that get wrapped up by this episode, John?
There's a couple things to touch on. So in season 1, episode 9, Mike predicted that Willow will continue to be under threat because she is smart. Now, this isn't what happened in this episode is not precisely what Mike was talking about. There was a pattern, particularly in season 1, where Willow was like, her character was the genius, and that seems to have been relaxed a little bit. But she was constantly being victimized, partly because she was, the genius character. We're gonna eat the monster's gonna eat the smartest kid in school or whatever. What do you guys think? This is a version of that? Is she being, is she under threat because she's smart?
I think she might be under threat because she's a witch, which might be a new set of predictions.
But she's a smart witch. She reads. She reads.
But Amy's under threat. Michael's under threat.
Are they smart?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Maybe the threat is coming from her mother. Like, because she even said, like, I've never messed up ever before, not even once. And this one thing, and maybe if she'd fucked up more in her life, she would not be, her mom would be more cool right now.
I'm going to say that prediction's still open. I don't feel like she was under, I mean, I think without reading, into the text, I don't think we can say that she was under threat just because she was smart.
Yeah.
In season 2, episode 1, Mike predicted that Giles will lose his job at Sunnydale High School. That did not happen in this episode, but I kind of wonder why not. Because, obviously Snyder hates his guts and, wants to pull strings to get rid of him. But he could just fire him. It's probably within his power. I don't know if there's, a union, but... let's see. In season 2, episode 17, Mike predicted that the next time we see Willow's room, we will see fish in it. That was already denied in a previous episode. I just wanted to point out that we saw Willow's room again. There's still no fish. Okay. Just rubbing it in. Let's see. This is one we should have, I feel like, wrapped up a while ago, and I think I just missed it. Way back, season 3, episode 5, Mike predicted that Buffy will not pursue another teacher recommendation. That was part of the conditions of her getting back into school. I feel like if we were going to see that, we would have seen it. I think we can just give that to Mike.
Yeah.
The point was we just weren't going to see it. So
right. But
I think that
so much time,
that one should be confirmed by now, right?
What if when she gets her diploma, it says failure to get teacher recommendation?
I don't think that's going to happen. I think we can just give that to Mike. We're just going to confirm that one.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So you ready for new predictions?
Hold up a second.
Okay.
I just want to point out that before we confirm that one, you are at 68.25. That one's confirmed. Giles and Joyce will not talk about hooking up ever again. They didn't talk about it, right? They just sort of alluded to it. Mike also predicted Giles will not have long-term effects from being knocked out repeatedly. That was discussed, but it didn't happen.
No effect, though.
So then we've touched on some things Mike has predicted, but nothing really confirmed or denied except for this sort of old one. So when we confirm that one, Mike, that puts you up to 68.75. So you're back up to 69, dude.
Why do you say it like?
That's how Bill and Ted say it in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure at the Circle K.
I thought it was just you doing that voice. I did not get the reference.
I got the reference.
It did not need to be explained. Okay, so I've got
what we said to each other. Well, let's find out.
That's how they trust the other them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give my love to the princesses. All right.
Okay, so here's the new prediction.
New predictions. Yep.
Okay. This is maybe needs to be broken apart into multiple statements. Fairy tales are real. There will be more fairy tale villains. The fairy tale formula is there will not be a typical villain. It will be fairy tale character plus whatever story idea they're trying to jam through. So I don't have the formula figured out exactly. But
okay, so more fairy tale characters as part of this prediction.
There will be more fairy tale characters as villains.
Can we just leave that as villains?
Okay, yeah, but they're not going to be it won't be the big bad wolf, right? But it might be the big bad wolf, but he could be invisible, and a werewolf god,
Rumpelstiltskin, but you know his name.
Mike, just leave it.
Okay.
More fairy tale characters as villains.
Yeah.
All right, great.
Non-villains, right? Just villains.
Joyce will try to understand Buffy again. And she will comically and adultly misunderstand her.
Got it.
Willow's mom is going to continue to ignore Willow and also not return.
So she's going to ignore her off screen? Is that what you're predicting?
Yes, off screen.
How much she's going to ignore her.
Yeah, okay.
She's going to ignore her so much, she's not going to appear on the show again.
Okay. Do you want to put that, a season frame on that? I mean, or just, we're going to handle this at the last episode.
Last episode.
Okay.
Willow is not going to stop being a witch.
Is that another?
Maybe that's too obvious.
Full season prediction or full series prediction?
I mean, this is not going to thwart her witchiness. Like,
It's fine.
Willow will master the 4 elements.
Wait a second. So wait, we have a prediction that Willow is going to continue to be a witch?
Yes.
Okay.
So if at any point she's like, I quit being a witch, you lose that?
I don't think she's going to quit being a witch. I think a witch.
So yes,
she's chosen
she
witch.
says it.
Willow has
Right.
chosen witchcraft. Willow is a witch now, and forever.
Now and forever.
Okay, and then so Willow will continue to be a witch, but also Willow will master the 4 elements.
Yeah, 4 elements:
What are the 4 elements?
earth, fire, air, water. Duh.
Where does
about
heart
heart?
come into play?
I actually have an answer for that, but it would be spoilers.
Okay. Yeah.
No adult is going to mention the witch hunt again. It will be as though it never happened.
That's a pretty reasonable prediction.
Slam dunk.
Giles is going to be missing some important knowledge in the future because it was burned or taken during this time.
Does that negate the adult acknowledging?
No,
Sorry.
Giles is like part of the gang. I guess like
Sure, I get it, yeah.
Giles is aware that the witch hunt happened, but like adults. Sorry, I need to be more specific. You're correct.
No
Adults,
non-Giles adult.
Civilians.
no parent will mention the witch hunt again. None of the people in Moo are going to mention it.
Are you predicting that Giles does not have any kids?
Oh, right, because then he can't be a parent.
Well, I'm just saying, what if Giles has like a long lost child from his Ripper days?
Oh,
Randy
man.
Giles.
You know what? You're absolutely right. The show might introduce a Giles kid, but I'm not going to fall for that. Amy will become human again, and it will be a scandalous reveal when she becomes human.
Because she'll be naked.
Yeah, she'll be naked. But it'll be like hilarious and funny, not hilarious and sad.
All right. Put that in there, John. Hilarious and funny, not hilarious and sad.
No, not going to put that in there.
It could come up.
I feel like Mike always wants to burden his predictions with like 18 qualifiers where it's like, Amy will appear again, but she'll be naked, but not all the way naked. She'll be partly naked, and she'll be wearing a hat.
sock.
And the hat will probably be orange. Like, I feel like that's how Mike is like, this dude, just leave it.
All right. Amy will get transformed back into a lady again.
Mainly because I don't want to type all that up, but like,
Yeah.
Is there a time limit on that prediction?
Oh, I mean, by the end of the season, right? Like,
okay. In season 3?
Yeah.
Amy will become human and have a scandalous reveal in season 3.
that seems reasonable to me.
Okay.
All right. Moving on then to, unless there's any more predictions want to add, it feels like a lot.
I think we're good. We don't need to do a dice prediction.
Cool. Let's go kill count.
I had 1 vampire, 1 demon, and 14 fake dead kids, which is 2 every 50 years.
Ugh.
49.
Math.
That is my kill count.
Now, do the kids count if there's 1 demon? If it's the
I
same
call 'em-
2
I
kids?
call them fake dead.
Okay.
So it doesn't really count. It doesn't count towards the overall series total of murdered bodies, but just something I thought I should list for this episode.
It's actually surprisingly low body count for
Actually,
this episode.
yeah, I feel like the show doesn't actually really build up to the high body counts until like specific episodes. That's one thing I found is I've been surprised multiple times at how low a kill count is.
We don't know how many like kids with eyeliner were murdered in the streets.
That's true. We also don't know how many he successfully killed, how many witches he successfully killed since 1649.
Right.
It's 3 a year, or if it's like he had good years and bad years. I don't know.
You should look up how many people actually died in the Salem witch hunts and like
And then multiply
add that to your.
by...
Add that. Oh
It's
yeah.
20.
Oh, well done.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of dead.
Yeah. Well, so I think that, Buffy, Willow, and Amy would have just been the opening gambit. Because now you have a
Good
demon
call.
loose with on a Hellmouth with no Slayer, or just, half the Slayer team, only Faith. So think your kill count would have gotten much higher.
Wow. Very interesting. I never thought about what would happen. Okay, my recommendations. I'm actually really pumped about these because I'm recommending all like movies I really enjoy that are about like the witch hunts and stuff. So Witchfinder General, aka in America Conqueror Worm, is a Vincent Price movie from 1968 that's about the British Civil War, and like it shows like it's like Vincent Price's only horror movie where he's actually really scary in it. I love Vincent Price, but usually he's like funny and charming. And this is like about a guy taking advantage of the situation and just murder, like going to from town to town, murdering women suspected of being witches. And he's like, it gets into like the economics of it and stuff. And it's just like a really good dark movie. I recommend Twins of Evil, which is also really fun but really dumb. It's a vampire movie, but it's Peter Cushing is like a pilgrim who burns witches and vampires at the stake. And like it's the third of the Karnstein trilogy from Hammer Horror, and it's got the Collinson's twins, who were Playboy's first twin models, as a good girl and a bad girl, the Twins of Evil. So like they move in with Peter Cushing, and you just get this kind of feeling of like they're just going to stay out late one night, and he's going to be like, "Oh, you're a witch! Time to burn you to death." Like you just get this feeling like of how threatening Peter Cushing as a pilgrim is. I recommend The Devils, which is a really great movie from 71 by Ken Russell, starring Oliver Reed as a priest who gets accused of witchcraft. And I mean, it's a really great movie about like kind of the madness of mass hysteria. And Vanessa Redgrave is this like sexually repressed nun who like leads the town against the priest, and it's causes like the fall of their whole world, basically. Really great, totally crazy movie. And it's also one of the like most censored movies in history. It's like been banned in a lot of countries, and it's really hard to find an uncensored print of it. Even to this day, it's hard to find like the right one that doesn't have the like 17 minutes of non-hysteria edited out. So I recommend that. What were my other recs? Oh yeah, the new movie, The Witch, came out in like 2015. Really good.
That was
totally
good.
solid. And I don't know if The Crucible. I mean, I think everybody probably had to watch that in high school. It's good. I also, in non-movies, I recommend The Photographs of William Mortensen, who Ansel Adams called the Antichrist. He was an American photographer that was really awesome. And he did a lot of like photos, like he did like early kind of Photoshop work stuff. And he did like photos of like witches being burned and like the occult and stuff like that. So I'm showing for the YouTube audience some of the like you might have seen this photo before. He does stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool. I'll have to look into that. That's
so he's a really cool one. And then in a unrelated thing, I recommend the Netflix series The End of the Fucking World, because it's based on mini comics that my friend Chuck Forsman made. I went to school with this guy. He was like the first person in our class who got published by like Fantagraphics, and now he has like a fucking Netflix series, and it's really weird because it's like totally like accurate. And I'm like, I've read these in mini comic form, and now like I watch the show and I hear the dialogue that he wrote, but it's being said by like British kids because it was a BBC production. So it's just totally weird. And it's but it's good. It's not related to witches, but it's about like if Harold from Harold and Maude was like a psychopath. That's my pitch for what that show is about.
Yeah, he's legit. I actually just went to a book signing of his for his book Slasher, which was a fun book that got published by Floating World Comics in Portland, and he was selling that book. Also, The End of the Fucking World book.
Did you say you knew me?
No, I was too. I was just starstruck because I'd read all his other stuff, so it was a little challenge. Revenger is really good, and I really loved that. And then his other, but it's interesting because his stuff's all very different. Like his Revenger work, and then The End of the World, and then he has another book I can't name right now. All is so different.
Yeah, one he drew in like a Popeye style, which is also like a style I imitate sometimes. Like, but it was basically like if X-Men was set in a real high school and was drawn in a Popeye style. That's like his newest book. I forget what it's called. But anyway, Yeah.
But yeah, his stuff's fantastic. That's amazing that you guys went to school together. I feel we all feel that way when we got your book in the mail, Dennis. So we're all equally.
Thanks. Yeah. It's like what?
Well, cool.
Next Netflix special for you. You'll get it.
Well,
and then it looks like Travis recommended The Craft.
Only because it's a '90s movie. It doesn't have and witches, but it doesn't have the persecution aspects here.
I feel like we might have recommended The Craft before.
We may have.
yeah, so I think we actually recommended it like season 1. I think
Should
episode
probably
1.
always be recommending The Craft because that's an amazing movie.
I think we had a long discussion of Fairuza Balk at one point.
Yeah, well, that's bound to happen. I feel like one time Mike said on Facebook or something like that he had just watched Ginger Snaps, and your friend James Green was like, "Oh, what's next? The Craft?" And I was like, "Well, I guess I'm never going to recommend The Craft."
I would not put those movies in the same category at all.
Yeah, I don't think I would either. Is there an actress from Ginger Snaps in The Craft? I guess it's just like it has that 90s vibe.
No, but did you know that Bridget from Ginger Snaps plays Bev in the original It TV movie?
I did, yeah.
That's crazy because in my mind those come from completely different eras. But she plays a kid in both. It's weird.
Yeah, which would be interesting because I would like to. They're not going to do this obviously, but with the Craft or with the It sequel coming out, which is them as adults, if they cast like the surviving members of the kids as the adults.
Oh, that would be great. They're not going to do that,
like,
but that would be great.
Adult Seth Green play like.
Yes, they should have adult Seth Green. Oh, that'd be hilarious. Although Seth Green doesn't look anything like that kid.
Yeah, he's actually shorter now than that kid.
I need to see that new It. That looks great, and I know it's on
all right.
streaming now.
I like the original. I like the original TV movie better. We don't have enough time in the podcast to talk about that. We can talk about that later.
Yeah, well, in the After Hours podcast where we talk about all the things that have been recommended and watch those, which would be fantastic.
Buffy Virgin After Hours.
Virgin After Hours is pretty great sounding.
Could call it Buffy Virgin Nights.
I wonder if Seth Green would be willing to. Sorry, now I'm like stuck on this idea of Seth Green like starring in the new It. You shouldn't have put that in my mind.
Well, he was willing to star in an episode of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, so I think he'd be up for starring in a real movie.
Thanks for listening to the Buffy Virgin podcast. We are on Twitter at Buffy Virgin Pod, on Instagram and Facebook as Buffy Virgin. There's BuffyVirgin.com. You can subscribe through iTunes and on any podcasting app that you might have.
Please buy my book, Land of Many Monsters. It's on Amazon, and you can follow me on Twitter at Dennis Comics, Instagram Dennis Saint Comics, etc.